All righty. Hello, everyone in this group. I am live with an old friend, Steven. He is a partner at the West Murmis Law Firm and going to talk to you about some of the less exciting stuff, but more exciting to have in place once you need it. It's the things that you should have done last week that you can do this week to get stuff going. So, Steven, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Brad. Doing great. Just midway through the week, so we're all the downhill at this point now.
Yeah. So everyone here, Steven is one of my good friends from high school's brother-in-law, and one of my clients actually set up a group text message like, "Hey, you got to meet Brad. He does some marketing stuff for us." And then Steven and I were like, "We know each other." So it's just like a funny reunion for us. But
Well, it's a small world too. I mean, also going back all the way to elementary school and being I was right behind your older brother. Um, and had your mom for some substitute classes. So I mean, yeah, it's a long history.
Yeah, it's
intertwined in multiple spots.
It is, and then look at us now. Where I knew that you were a lawyer. I did not know that you worked with contractors mostly. So I was like, it's perfect. And funny enough, we were at breakfast and we even already got to introduce some people to each other because we just ran into some people we knew. So good stuff. It's how the world works sometimes. So
it does.
Today, guys, Steven and I have been talking, and what I asked him was, hey, let's go over 5 things that people wish they knew in regard to their business. 5 things that a roofing contractor might not think of that they would wish they thought of if they got in any trouble. And what I decided to title this was 5 ways to legally fortify your business in 2023. So we all know that it's important to have your marketing in place. It's important to have your right team, your sales process, and all of that. But none of that matters if you don't have a good contract. If you don't have a good if you don't have like a good way to protect your business, because as I mentioned, the last thing that you want, but what I've seen so many times is one job goes wrong, and especially early on, like that can really mess with you. And then if you start getting into the bigger jobs, it can mess with you even more. So it's scary if you don't get some of this stuff in place, but we're lucky to have amazing people like Steven. I come from a family of lawyers, and I'll tell you, there are some lawyers that fit the description. I don't think my family does, and I know that Steven doesn't. So he's one of the good guys, and he's here to help. I mean, that's, as I spoke with him, like you could just hear that he gets excited about like helping the lawyers, helping the different people that he works with, make sure that they're doing things right and make sure that they're protected in ways that maybe they didn't realize they needed protection. And those are the worst ways. I've heard so many horror stories, and we want to help you avoid them. So that's my little intro. Steven, I promised you yesterday I'd send you a script, and I didn't, or not a script, some questions. But why don't you tell them a little bit about like your history in the construction field with as a lawyer?
Yeah, well, I mean, like the old famous viral video, Bill O'Reilly, just we'll do it live. But yeah, no, Brett, I appreciate it. So for everyone, my name is Steven Dwyer. I'm a partner at West Murmis. I have, or to introduce what the firm does. So West Murmis, we are a boutique full-service construction law firm. So we're located in Houston, but we practice all across the state. And what does full service mean? Well, basically it means that we're there to help plan for, legal issues for clients, pursue and defend claims for owners, contractors, suppliers, manufacturers, and all types of construction matters arising from the work site. And I've been doing this since 2016. And I've represented people all over the place. I've represented homeowners against just remodel jobs or one-off jobs. I've represented major contractors like GT Leach. They do a lot of building around town. So I've also represented owners and roofing contractors. Multiple clients of mine are roofing contractors right now. And so, what do I do? Stephen R., what do I do? What have I been doing for the past 6 or 7 years? But really, my practice focuses on helping contractors protect the right to get paid for the work that they've done. You go out there, you get the job, you land it, you put crews on it, you do the work, you get paid. That's the expectation, but sometimes that's not how it always goes. Sometimes issues come up. So that's where I really help your customers and my clients and contractors in general, is whether that's through drafting the contracts, reviewing contracts presented to them. So if you're trying to get into the commercial space and or you have an owner present you with a contract, if you're given the contract, I'll review those, help point out spots you want, the provisions you want to keep, you don't want to keep. And then also, if you're not getting paid, I help pursue those, pursue contractors' rights through liens and dispute resolution to make sure that you do get paid, because I'm there to help you plan for and navigate those legal issues whenever they do come up, if they do come up.
Yeah, they will. And that's the thing is, like, I think it's, what's the phrase? You don't want a lawyer and like you wish you don't, a lawyer, someone like you wish you knew, you don't want to have them in your phone book, but you're going to be really glad that you do if you know. And the thing is, guys, you're like, it's a fact. Like, there's not many situations where reactively you're going to be calling Steven in a really good, happy mood. And that's the point that I'm making, though, is the reactive portion. Roofing contractors, I love y'all, but it's a fast-paced business. And a lot of the time, because the jobs, you're closing the deal, you're trying to get it, the supplier can deliver it the next day, especially in Texas. Like, everything moves so fast. And it kind of puts you in a position where we're trying to get these jobs done in 1 or 2 days. We don't want to have the crew out for another day. We have the next job to move on to. A lot of the time, you are in a position of being reactive within your business. Being reactive when it comes to the legal side of your business is the last thing that you want to do. So as I said, reactively, if you have Steven's number, you're going to be glad you have his number if you do need him. But the time to talk to Steven is proactively, is now, is before there's a problem. And that's kind of what I wanted to make the theme of this. And we came up with 5 different topics to legally fortify your business. Because if you can do things up front, then you're going to be able to avoid a lot in the future, because you're going to have employment issues. You're going to have homeowners that don't want to pay you. You're going to have subcontractors that give you issues. You're going to have all these things happen if you have a business that makes it past the first few years. Those things are going to happen. That's part of the game. We want to be ready for it. And as business owners, we all know that it's us. If we have a bad day, if something crazy happens, it's easy to kind of knock us off. Our job is to protect ourselves as the business owner in a lot of ways, mentally, emotionally, financially, and all of that, to make sure that we can keep going. And I would say working with someone like Steven or Steven himself on some of these things we're going to go over today is going to be really, really important to making sure that you're always able to continue having momentum and continue moving forward, because the last thing we want is an issue that could have been avoided coming up and knocking you off your game.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's a good point, because we can always be reactive. I mean, there are times when I have to be reactive, and it's just kind of the nature of the job. But if you're reactive, it just puts you behind. You might have left money on the table that you could have had beforehand. You might expose yourself to more liability being reactive that you would have if you had been proactive and had planned for it or limited it a lot earlier. And so, everyone's, we're business owners. We're always still trying, because, yes, we're a law firm. It's still a business. We're all trying to,
probably a more complicated business than we
sometimes.
Yeah.
But you just want to make sure that you're always trying to look at the right investments to make sure that you don't find yourself in a precarious position later.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times I've had that happen, where I'm trying to help the client be reactive, and there are issues that come up, and we're just crossing our fingers and say, all right, these are things you could face. Let's hope that they don't come up.
Yeah.
We're let that sleeping dog lie, and we'll just keep moving on. But other times, if I have clients that have me involved with it from the get-go, either whether it's drafting a contract or whether it's they have an issue come up on the project and they're saying, hey, what can I do? What am I in the game, in the middle of the game? That helps a whole lot more. But I mean, also, like you said, the roofing business is fast-paced. When these issues come up, you don't want to be dealing with it. And also trying to work on the next job, because you can't really devote your full attention to both things when you're trying to chase down jobs. So, at least what I try and do is be that sounding board, or be that one to take that issue off your plate and let you say, hey, I got it. Other people like me in the construction law business, we got it. You go worry about taking care of your business. I'll give you updates when they come up.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is I think part of what I really want to do in this group, and in all the content that I create, and sometimes it's a little like, hey, come work with me, but those are the times I'm feeling especially convicted, because what I want to do is help you create moats around your business. And that's a moat that me as a marketer can't mess up. That's a moat that a homeowner can't mess up. That's a moat that a bad review can't mess up. What we want to do is create moats around your business. We want to make sure that you have strategies in place to be self-sufficient, to keep on rolling. You've done the work that only needed to be done one time, or only needs to be done once a year, or something like that.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that's easy to forget, but that's the stuff that if you do it up front and you're intentional about doing it, then you're going to be very grateful. Because if you can create these moats around your business and protect yourself and make sure that you're able to keep moving, make sure that you have the ability to generate leads and stuff on your own, make sure that you have all of that within your business, to where you're not relying on Steven to come save the day. Because you don't want to. He's there and I'm there. Like, we're all here to help when you need that. And it's going to happen probably. But the best thing that any of us service providers can do for you, really, is help you create moats, help you not need us as often. Yeah. So when you do, we know it's real and we can jump in and all that, but help you not need us. That's going to allow you to keep going. So without further ado, Steven, let's talk about number one on the list, unless you have something you want to add real quick.
No, let's go. Let's do it.
Number one on the list. So I would say that I'm glad you put this first, because I think this is one of the most important ones. And we're talking in terms of Texas. I know that we have some out-of-staters, which don't check out. This is all information that you're going to be able to compare and contrast for your own state. And we also want to make sure, like, how we're thinking through this as well. Like, how Steven is analyzing and putting together a contract, because just that thought process and understanding kind of how to think through it is going to be helpful and going to help you find the right law partner for you. And by the way, guys, just want to throw this out there. Steven's relatively young, named partner at a law firm. Like, that's pretty cool. So just want to throw that out there. I meant to say it earlier. It's a big deal. So All right, project contracts. What do you think that tell me something that people get wrong in their contracts a lot of the time. That's a
Yeah.
fun.
So I mean, like you said, leading into this point is, there are some people from out of state looking into this, but it just kind of helps reinforce to them too that maybe their state has a similar provision we're going to talk about, or every state for sure is going to have their own specific kind of construction clauses that they require in there to protect customers and homeowners and things like that. But to really delve into it, and again, kind of again, earlier disclaimer is, because of the people that are watching, what I want to talk about is just focused on residential roofing or minor construction projects.
Yeah.
Whether, if it's a commercial subcontractor, commercial general contractor, public project, a lot of different laws are going to apply, but we're just going to focus on what's going on with residential projects. And so really right off the bat, the one thing I see wrong are things contracts don't include that Texas requires them to include.
Yeah.
One of the big things is a 3-day right to rescind provision. So basically it means that the contract has to explicitly state that a homeowner has 3 business days from the signing of the contract to rescind, to cancel it, to pull out.
So can
and
I
that's often, I'm sorry?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What happens if they put on the roof the day after the contract is signed?
Then you violated that provision. The 3-day right to rescind requires
but the contractor violated it.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have to have 3 days to think about it and continue to decide to go with it.
So when they sign the contract, it's not over.
No.
They could unsign it essentially in 2 days later, and they're off the hook for everything.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily off the hook. There's still other legal claims you can go for. There's ones of like, if you did work and you added value to a house, then you should be paid for whatever that value is.
Yeah.
But now you're having to prove what the value was that you added to the house. We all have profit margins, everyone's including in projects, but really at that point, then it's, if you don't have the right contract, if you violated this Texas provision that makes the contract void, I'll make that clear. The statute that requires this language in the contract, if it's not, or the contractor violates it, the contract is void. There's words in legal words that there's voidable, which means that someone can continue to go through the contract, but they can back out of it if they want to. That's voidable. Void means it's faulty from the get-go. And so if you have a contract, you're doing a roof for 15 grand, and you break this provision, if you want to enforce the contract, you can, good luck and go for it. But if they have a good attorney that looks at it and sees this provision's gone, they have an argument against you to say, no, your contract's void. They don't have to pay you that full contract amount. Let's now strike a deal for 70, 60, 50 cents on the dollar, because that's what we think the value out of the house is. And also, to be clear, it's limited to 3 business days. So
yeah,
if you sign the contract on Friday,
3
that
days
means they have the right to cancel until Wednesday the following week. Saturdays and Sundays don't count.
Robert says in Michigan it's also 3 days, so it sounds like that's something that might be relatively common. And that's the thing. I mean, like, that's crazy. Like, I know for a fact that a lot of people don't realize that. I know for a fact that sometimes it's a race to, okay, you want to move forward? Okay, let's do your job. Like, we can do it tomorrow. And that people think that's like a good selling point, but you're exposing yourself, and potentially that's not good for the homeowner either. And it's just something where, like, there's no reason to rush that. because maybe you could get the money 3 days earlier, but imagine if imagine if imagine if you lost 50 or 25 or 30% of the revenue from that job
Yeah.
because that's all that you were able to settle for.
Yeah. And that's usually, I mean, when I've had clients come to me and ask me, hey, take a look at this. What do you think? Or that's what the first thing I look for to see, because that's one of the common things I see that's not in there. Or, they've limited it to where it's, you have 2 business days, but the first day counts. The day we sign the contract is day 1.
Mm-hmm.
So technically, you really only have 1 day.
Yeah.
And again, you're running the risk of having a void contract. You have a void contract, but now you're running the risk of, if you have to lay your cards and can't enforce it,
to bite you in the butt. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something, I mean, I think a lot of the time people, like, no offense to SVG, sorry, you don't know who they are. Like, oh, SVG will write your like, here we have our contracts templated and all that, and maybe they have individual contracts per state, but like a lot of the time, people are pulling just generic contracts off the internet, or they're purchasing like these contract templates from this or that. And guys, that's not how you do it. Get a lawyer to write your contract for you. Now, your contract and your proposal are different. They don't have to be the same thing. So you don't have to make that. You don't have to like, oh, well, a lawyer can't make my contract all pretty. Contracts aren't supposed to be pretty. They're supposed to keep you safe. So
yeah, and to that point, I mean, I've seen other residential contractors use. I don't know if anyone's familiar with AIA. It's they kind of produce like a boilerplate contract statewide that a lot of people use. I've seen residential contractors incorporate that into their contract. Well, it's a contract that's been approved to say, hey, okay, we can use boilerplate 1 across all 50 states, and every single state has different laws. In those contracts, there's provisions in there that aren't allowed in Texas.
Yeah.
And when they go to enforce them, I mean, I've been able to get clients out of those contracts because it's not enforceable in Texas.
Yeah.
Or it's not including the right things you have to have. So
and frankly, like, I hate to say it, but like, it's either, if it's free, they're trying to sell you something on the back end. If it's not free, they're just trying to make a quick buck. Like, get a lawyer to give you your contracts. The generic contracts that are on the internet, that's not specific to you, that's not specific to your situation. And this is one of those things. This is up there with your liability insurance and all that. Like, this is the kind of stuff that you need within your business before you do anything, before you hire a marketer, before you do this, before you do that. Like, you need to have this stuff in place, because this is the stuff that could cause everything to crash. This is the stuff that people don't think about. But if you look at roofing businesses, and the average lifespan, by the way, Steven, I don't know if you know this, the average roofing business only lasts for 3 years.
Wow.
And what does that mean? That means 50% are less than 3 years.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. And if you're in here, I hope that you're going to make it past the 3-year marker that you already have. But that's the stuff that's putting these people out of business. Like, it's not, and it's cash flow issues and all of that. But like, what started the cash flow issue other than just maybe being irresponsible? Like, this is the kind of stuff that can have a significant impact. So let's move on for time's sake. But
yeah,
contracts for your projects, one of the first things that you need to make sure is very, very clear. And talk to Steven if you're in Texas. I know that he will take care of you. I know you don't have to sift and go research your own and all that. Talk to Steven. If you're outside of Texas, find a good construction specific attorney. Don't just use your uncle, and put together a contract that is made by someone who's an expert in putting this together and keeping your business safe.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. I mean, yeah, and I'll just to button up on the contract point, because I mean, there's several other points like we could have gone over, but I mean, when I got involved in construction law, one, I didn't know that it was a thing, a practice area, until I found a group that did it.
Mm-hmm.
And two, when I started diving into it, I mean, there's still, I've been doing this for, what is it now, 7 years? Like, I mean, there's still new things I come across because there's
Yeah.
just, it touches so much. I mean, it touches, em, uh, employment issues, property law issues, um, government, and local enforcement codes and permitting. I mean, just there's so much that it's hard to navigate it through, and I'm still doing it, but there's just so many things you do have to keep in mind.
And people don't
And you
know
just
what
want to be
they
careful
look
about it.
for. Yeah, I mean, like that's just because, and like my dad's an attorney, my brother's an attorney. My brother is like in criminal defense and like white collar criminal defense mostly. My dad is corporate litigation and stuff like that. Doesn't really matter, but the point is, they're not construction contract experts. Like that's not what they do. That's something that if my brother does that for anyone in a year, it's a favor for some random person and him just like doing something. If my dad does that, it's a complete random one off. That is not what you should hire them for. So the point that I'm making is you have to be on top of this stuff. You need someone that actually knows what they're doing. It's like if you hire someone that it's like if you hired a marketing company that doesn't know anything about the roofing industry, like that's going to be harder to have quick success with. So just make sure that you're finding someone specific. If you're in Texas, highly suggest Steven. So employment contracts is number 2. Are you using them the right way? So I think this is a very good question. Partially because the employment is a complete pain in the butt in the roofing industry. Anyone who's watching this will probably agree. It's a pain. It's difficult to get people to stay. A lot of the time, salesmen are 1099. They jump around to job for company to company, and then eventually try to start their own. Like it's difficult. So, what ways can the contractors watching protect themselves and protect their business within their employment contracts? And that would
Yes,
be
I think.
contractor agreements and things like that as well.
Yeah, I think really the bottom line is have whoever your employees are, whether they're independent contractors or employees, have them sign an employment contract or an independent contractor agreement. And I understand, that 1099s are have a lot of benefits to it. I mean, you don't have to pay payroll taxes on them. Um, you can kind of push off a lot of liability exposure to them. But the issue that I think a lot of people run into is that just because you call them an independent contractor, if you treat them like an employee, and there are certain factors legally that do that, if you treat them like an employee, it doesn't matter what you call them. They could be an employee. And now if they're an employee, now you're open to more liability if something happens on a project. So really, Texas defines employment or makes a difference between the contracts between what is an independent contractor and what is an employee. Really, there are two factors: is does the employer or the company have the right to direct and control the details of the work? Now, you don't have to exercise it, but if the company has the right to do so,
So
that person is
if you
considered
say, "Hey, I need you to install this way over here," that
then that leans more towards they are an employee. Training, giving someone training on specific things on giving them industry focused training on how to do the job, that could lean more towards an employee rather than an independent contractor. And the concerns I see with that is if they're an employee, they can be deemed an employee, then legally, then if they get hurt and they're looking to, on a job and they're looking to get medical expenses covered, well, now you could be running the risk of being a non-subscriber to workers' comp. And all it takes is 1% fault. If you are 1% at fault for the incident, then you pay everything as a non-subscriber. And I've come across non-subscriber cases, and they are brutal because.
What does that mean, non-subscriber? Can you help?
Yeah. So in Texas, if you have an employee, you're required, in most instances, to subscribe to Texas workers' comp insurance. Basically means if your employee gets hurt, workers' comp will take care of it. The company itself is not liable for it. But so you have workers' comp is backed up by other insurance companies, and they will be the ones to pay out any medical bills and fight the issues or anything like that. If you're a non-subscriber, that means if your employee or independent contractor deemed employee gets hurt, there's no insurance there to cover any medical expenses. So if they fall, break their leg, and it costs several thousand, then your company could be on the hook for that.
Mm-hmm.
Another issue I could see coming up situation would be if the independent contractor is on a new project, and while he's on the roof and inspecting things, say he slips and kicks a gutter and a kid's walking by at that point, gashes him in the face. You're treating them like an employee. Then you thought that, hey, they're an independent contractor, I'm not going to be liable for that injury. Well, if that family wants to fight it and they want to argue that person's an employee, well, now your company's on the hook, to cover those injuries. And so the way to avoid this is just make sure that you have independent contract agreements in place that are clear. Because I've seen a lot of people just have them sign 1099s and that's it. That's just not going to be enough if certain bad situations come up. And I agree. I understand some of these situations can be rare. It's going to take another attorney to look through it and fight through these issues, but and try and make sure that argue that an independent contractor is actually an employee. But all it takes is that one or two cases where something terrible happens, or something really bad happens, and now your company's facing thousands of dollars in personal injury issues.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, and thanks, Will. I appreciate it. Stephen Will says this is so dang valuable. Lawyer charge you thousands of dollars for this info. So
appreciate it.
It's very, very relevant. I mean, like if you take the lazy way out on getting someone set up, and then you're like, oh, let's just jump right in. Like we need to start making some money. Let's go hit the streets. Let's train them and all of that. You are skipping a very important step that could potentially keep you from losing a lot of money in a situation. I mean, as much as I really, really hate to even admit this, like every 2 or 3 months, I have tons of friends on Facebook that are roofing contractors. Every 2 or 3 months, I see someone posting about someone falling off a roof and dying. It's brutal, but like that's the kind of stuff, like that's a terrible situation. Don't let that terrible situation also take you out of business if that stuff happens. And that's the thing, like don't let that terrible situation if this happened to you, and I hope it doesn't, and this one actually might not happen. I hope it doesn't happen. But if that happens to you, don't let that awful situation where you're already mourning, you're already sad, you're already upset, also be the thing that potentially bankrupts you and ruins you. So putting these things in place are going to be really, really important. Subcontractor agreements, independent contractor agreements, like all of this stuff is very, very important to make sure that you're doing, because I'm going to tell you, like, you guys do treat your salespeople like employees. You do. Like, there's I don't know of a single 1099 salesman that actually would fall into that category if you actually look at what their day-to-day is. Sure, they're not forced to come into the office and you're not telling them they have to do this or they have to do that. With that being said, like that's not enough. People work from home now, like all that, like that's not enough. It's getting even more blurry, I would say, and you need to make sure that you are taking into account these things and protecting yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, to kind of go in, if these issues come up, I mean, and someone wants to go after your company through a lawsuit or something, I mean, if you have set up the proper procedures in place to make sure that you can say with a straight face and have the stuff to back it up that this person is an independent contractor, 1099. There are laws in Texas that if you have a lawsuit filed against you for the basis of an independent contractor, you can have a free out. If that's the case. I mean, if you have the right processes in place and the right contract signed up, you can make that argument in a lawsuit and try and get yourself out. Now,
so a good agreement, would a good agreement allow you to maybe have them trained and all of that while still maintaining that independent contractor in a lawsuit?
yeah, I mean, the Texas Workforce Commission has like a 20-point factor, like 20 different situations of, factors of like weighing, is somebody independent contractor, are they an employee? And, it's probably good to look, find that and look that over and just kind of see, go through each one and, give yourself a value of like, which way am I leaning more towards them? Because I'll give you even examples of saying, pay scale or, wages. An employee is paid a wage, periodically. An independent contractor is paid, a set price or a fixed percentage or whatever for a job. But there's like 19 other factors. So, I mean, just go through and say, hey, which way am I leaning more towards on how I'm treating my employers or my independent contractors? And what do I need to do to step further away from treating them as employees and back towards treating them as independent contractors?
Yeah. And I think that that's something that, like, it's complicated enough to where you shouldn't try to tackle that on your own. And you shouldn't try to like leave it to a template on the internet or well, we'll just figure this out and all that, because we want to make sure that they're fully like that all the points are covered. And
Yeah.
There's the Texas Workforce Commission. What else is there? There's every other there's every other state as well that has their own. Like, it's complicated, it's difficult. Like, this is stuff that's specific to where you are. It's not something where you can ask in a roofing forum with people all over the country and get the right answer. Like, they're going to be different answers. They're going to be different things. So, like, this is not the situation to dive into the roofing industry and ask for advice and all that. Like, this is something that you need a lawyer to help you with. Okay.
And one other thing, because you talked about non-competes or what to do with employees. The only thing I would say is, I know a lot of companies use non-competes, but I'll just make everyone aware that last week or 2 weeks ago, the Federal Trade Commission is proposing a rule that would outright ban non-competes across the country. Now, a number of states have already done that. Texas hasn't banned non-competes, but they have severely limited them in certain ways. So even if you have a non-compete, it may not be enforceable in Texas. But just to kind of protect yourself from that, I would say stay away more from non-competes. And if there's things that you want to do protect, non-disclosures are still totally fine, especially if they relate to trade secrets. Now, I'm not sure if there's a lot of trade secrets that roofing contractors can point to. But trade secrets would be customer lists and things like that. But then you have to do other steps. Just because you have a list of customers on a sheet and you have written down it's in your truck, that doesn't mean they're a customer list legally.
What about if they're in like a CRM, like a software that is like that you have to have a username and everything for?
Yeah, that those factors. Yeah, if it's in the office, password protected on a computer, that is a customer list.
What if the salesperson has the homeowner's number saved in their cell phone though, from when they were working with them?
Yeah, then I'll have to give the blurry answer of it depends.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
No,
going to
that,
be
that one is more gray area than clear cut.
Yeah. Okay. So next, number 3, getting paid. Are you using every tool under Texas law to protect payment? What tools are there? How do you know if you're using all the tools? How are you making sure?
Yeah, again, the number one tool every time is just have a good contract. If you have payment terms, pretty clear cut defined in there, then that's what you always want to start with, because that's the easiest thing to point to. That's the one thing that you have. You and the other side agreed to a contract. These are the terms. As long as you have an enforceable contract, go back to what we were talking about earlier. Then that's always where you want to begin. Have the right contract that gives you the right payment terms. But otherwise, one of the big issues that I think people overlook in the roofing business are liens. That's the other option that's always there available for any contractor. But there is an issue that you always have to be aware of for residential homestead
Yeah,
liens.
I was going to say that's complicated.
It's a little more complicated. You have some more hoops to jump through. It's not impossible, but there are some hoops to jump through. One is figuring out, is this the person's homestead? Now, default 90+% of the time it is. Now if you're doing a roof on, you landed a big fish and it's somebody's ranch house that has a huge roof, and
what if it's a rental property?
Sorry?
If it's one of their rental properties.
Yeah, that is not a homestead. Homestead has to be, we're all in Texas pretty familiar if you own a house, because you're designating that because you get, certain tax benefits for it. But if this, just, it's a casual question. Hey, you own any other property? Is this the main, is this where y'all live? Is where all your mail comes to? Likely that's their homestead.
Could that be something in your contract where they check, this is my homestead?
Yeah, I would say it'd be even probably better in a proposal.
Okay.
When you're getting out there, have them just acknowledge, hey, is this our homestead? If so, okay, well now you have an idea of what the other hoops you have to jump through, and those requirements are the contract has to be signed by all the property owners. So if you're dealing with a married couple, you need both spouses to sign. And
would
that's
you
fine.
suggest that in general?
I think you should. I think it's always safe, because for other legal reasons, and if you go for a judgment and you try and get money from them, now you have two people liable for it. So if you have the wife sign it, but all the money's in the husband's name, okay, well, great. You have a judgment that's worth that, maybe the paper it's printed on, and that's about it.
By the way, you guys could sue anyone. You could sue the homeless guy down the street if you want, but good luck.
Yeah. But and how do you do that? It's simple. You put just a second line on the contract for the other person to sign. Another step you have to do is you have to have the contract signed before the work begins. Okay. I mean, that's kind of a practice that everyone should be doing. You don't want to go and start doing work before the contract is signed. Especially goes back to what we're talking about with 3 days to the 3-day right to rescind. Is that if you're instituting that procedure, that process, well then you're gonna already be doing this one step. And the last one you really have to be concerned about, and it's not that difficult, but you have to file the contract with the county clerk, so with the real property records where the property is.
Do you need to do that up front before you start the project? Okay.
Yes, you should.
That's gonna be. How difficult of a process is that?
So much stuff has been moved online now that.
So it's something like maybe an admin person can do, like at the
easily. Yeah, you wouldn't need me for that. That's an admin job. That's easy.
Okay. Yeah. So that one's one that you could do that I would imagine 95% of contractors aren't doing, just as a way to keep yourself a little more.
And then, if you've done all those things, now you have at least at the get-go protected your ability to lien a project you're not getting paid on. After that, then, we might get into a little bit, but, there's ways, deadlines you have to make and filing deadlines and things like that, and notice deadlines you have to do to enforce a lien. But these are at least the initial steps you need to do. And I mean, I've gotten homeowner clients out of contracts because, or not out of contracts, but I've had contractors threaten the homeowner clients I've had and say, "Hey, if you don't pay us, we're going to lien your property." It's,
Yeah, good luck.
did you do these things? No, I know you didn't because I checked the property records, and also, you didn't have both spouses sign it. So, if you file lien, then we're going to go ahead and sue to get the lien off.
Yeah, it's going to get kicked back. And also,
every time that happens, they back down. So you want to put yourself in a position that you can have, you have teeth to your argument of, hey, if I'm not going to be paid, I'm going to lien.
Yeah. And that leads us to the next, the next section, refusing to get paid. So what do you do? What do you do when a homeowner just doesn't pay you? I mean, this I'd imagine happens almost to every single person at least once a year. Is there's a portion of the check that they don't want to pay. It's an insurance job, and the person decides to keep their deductible, and you just didn't check all your boxes at first, and now you're stuck either committing insurance fraud or there's a lot of situations like this. So what do we do? I mean, when someone is refusing to pay, is the first step to try to file a lien on their property? That seems pretty aggressive.
Yeah, I mean, if you've done it appropriately, I mean, so if you're the one that signed the contract with the homeowner, which I imagine nearly 100% of roofers are the ones doing that, you have time. The filing deadline is to file a lien on a residential property is like 3 or 4 months. It depends on commercial you have a little longer, but residential it's at least 3 months.
That's a good point, I would say, because I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
But that's a great point because it doesn't mean you don't have to just freak out and rush and all that. Like you can take a breath and move more intentionally. So you don't have to be as reactive. But go ahead.
No, I would definitely say the lien is the first one to look at. But like I said, you don't have to freak out. It's 3 months after the work is completed. So or after the month the work is completed. So like if you complete your work and
on the 2nd
on the 2nd of February, well, your first month is March. It's not February. But if you complete it on January 31st, now your first month is February.
Yeah.
So you just have to be aware of the deadlines. But you have 3 months. So you can try and start to work with the homeowner and send a demand letter or whatever it is, say, hey, we're owed this money. We want to pay that money, but if we're not, we will pursue all legal options, including filing a lien on your property. And sometimes that will convince them to do it because no one wants to be liened. But if you get to that deadline, you want to, and you've done all the appropriate things beforehand. I think lien's always the first step because then after you file the lien, you have a year to foreclose to file a lawsuit on it to get that money back on it. So that buys you more time. But then once you get that lien in place, okay, well now I have more time to see if I can work through this. And then if not, then you send a demand letter, say we're going to file a lawsuit on multiple things. At that point, you have a breach of contract claim if you have a good contract. You have a lien foreclosure claim if you've done the lien process the right way. And also in Texas, there's a really interesting provision that I don't think a lot of roofing contractors know called the Prompt Pay Act. And it requires an owner to pay a contractor or original contractor, whoever they've signed the contract with. They must pay within 35 days of a pay request. If not, well, then that's another thing you can file a lawsuit, another claim you can make is violation of prompt pay. And
that's a good one. Does the prompt pay act apply to insurance companies?
It does not. No, it's who you sign a contract with. Yeah, yeah. Now they might have, the homeowner might have their own claim against the insurance company.
Yeah,
because their policy is technically a contract, and there's other Texas laws that deal with insurance companies and good faith and fair dealing with their insureds. But that also kind of is a kick in the butt I've seen to some people because prompt pay gives you, it jumps up the interest on the unpaid balance. So, it ultimately leans up, typically on any claim you have in Texas, you get like 5% interest, per year, on a claim, that's not paid or a breach of contract claim. But violation of the prompt pay, it's 18% a year. So, more than 3 times the amount.
Yeah.
Now, does it, when you break it down per month or per day, is it a lot? No, but it's also interest on money that you should have in your pocket, and that also might help move the needle on someone to
Yeah, you don't have to do the
way.
math for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is a good way of like, and part of this is like, how can you avoid a lawsuit as well? Like, how can you avoid bringing this to lawsuit? By just knowing this stuff and being equipped with this knowledge and communicating about this firmly and effectively without threatening, because we don't want to do that, then this might be the thing that helps move the needle along.
Yeah. So I think it's just, it's really just kind of levels of escalation. It's, letter of,
Letter of
unpaid balance, threaten to file the lien, demand letter, file lawsuit. And, each step escalate, it goes with the escalation letter, but sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, last year I had, for a client of mine, he was, he had a case where he wasn't paid about like $8,800. And so, still a decent amount of money. It's not, a massive amount, but you always are concerned when it comes to chasing down your money and bringing in a lawyer for it is, do you want to throw good money going after bad?
Well, the homeowner would have to pay your expenses, right?
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. Is all those things I listed, the foreclosure of a lien, breach of contract, prompt pay, all of those laws in Texas allow attorney's fees to be awarded to you when you win. So, yes, you would also make a claim for, hey, I've also had to pay my attorney whatever. So that's now part of my claim. Not only do you also owe me the balance of what you owe me, now I'm going after my attorney's fees too. But like back to the story, he had $8,800 he got stiffed on. He came to me. We didn't file lien because we just, the processes weren't in place. But then we did demand letter. They ignored us. We filed a lawsuit that got his attention, and then he paid. So ultimately, with me diving in the file, doing a little bit of work, he paid me less than $2,000 and got the $8,800 back. So, in the end, still got 68, nearly $7,000 back that he wouldn't have had.
Yeah.
So, it was still, he was still in the black on it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do anything that's going to put someone in mind. It makes no sense to pay me or another attorney $5,000 to chase 4 or $5,000 to chase 5.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't.
Yeah. And the thing is, guys, this is part of what, I'm trying to not be bad about interrupting, but this is part of it is like, this is why you need to find someone that's good and trustworthy. Because I'll tell you this, like not every lawyer would say what he just said. I want to take a moment to recognize he's here to partner with people. He's here to build long-term relationships. I'm going to say like, he's a partner at a relatively successful law firm. He's here to make long-term relationships. He's not a nickel and dime guy. And that's an advantage to you, and having access to someone like that, like that's the kind of person that you want. You don't want the massive volume lawyer that has a massive amount of commercials on TV. And you also don't want the lawyer like in what's it called? What's that show? Better Call Saul, that has an office in the nail salon. Like this is the median. Like this is the kind of person that is going to really be able to take care of you because they're in it for a career, and a career that help you stay in business so y'all can keep having a long relationship. So
yeah, I can promise you behind that door is not a nail salon.
I know that's funny. So let's wrap this up. We have one more. Say a homeowner, and I think I'm glad we're ending on this. Say instead of you trying to get the money from the homeowner and all that, a homeowner says, this guy didn't do what he was supposed to do. and now they file a claim against you, which is going to happen once again. How do you handle that? Like, this isn't a matter of chasing money anymore. This is a matter of someone trying to get money out of you. And the scary thing is they can make it a hell of a lot more money than the original contract was for. And so like you're very exposed in this regard. Like, so can you like walk us through a situation where this has happened with one of your clients, maybe? If you have.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been on both ends. Like I've said before, is I've represented everyone along the chain, multi-million-dollar projects to roofing projects for homeowners, or small additions, or whatever it is. So I've dealt with this issue on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
But what you need to be aware of as the roofing company is, if you get a claim filed against you, there's a statute in Texas that's called the Residential Construction Liability Act. And if it's a home defect issue or a construction defect issue, this claim captures it. You want to know this one backwards and forward, or have someone that does.
What is it called?
It's called the Texas Residential Construction Liability Act, or we just always call it RCLA, RCLA. Now that act, go back to touch on part of the contracts we were talking about before. That statute specifically says, as a provision, says you must include this provision in 10-point boldface font in every contract. Now it doesn't really say, it doesn't say the contract is void without it, but again, just to give yourself any argument against your contract being unenforceable, you just want to include it. It's like a paragraph. It's easy. But the whole purpose of RCLA is the legislature decided that, well, at one point years ago, there's so much litigation going on with construction defect issues. So they decided, let's try and do something to move this out of the courthouse doors and resolve them without the need to spend a bunch of attorney's fees. Let's see if we can institute a process that helps us resolve sooner. And there's a lot of deadlines we can go through. There's no need to go through it because I'll just be putting out a bunch of numbers and it's easily forgotten. But what you need to know about it is that it requires the homeowner to give you, the builder, notice of any defects that they are claiming against you that you're responsible for, and give detail on each of those defects.
In like a certain amount of time? Is it like in the 30-day range, a 6-month range, a year range?
No. So then you're going into other issues of like statute of limitations, which is basically means that there are certain time frames where someone must bring a claim against you with a lawsuit to preserve it. Typically, if it's a breach of contract, it's 4 years. In Texas, you cannot limit a breach of contract claim contractually for anything less than 2 years.
Okay.
Now, again, that goes back to contracts, but I have seen contracts, that provision not be enforced because you have to be 2 years, no less than 2 years. So I've seen people say 2 years on the date, that's when it expires. No, 2 years and 1 day is when it can expire. So I've seen people try and enforce the clause. Say, you didn't bring it in time. It's been 3 years since you did it. I'm going to enforce this provision. Well, courts have struck it down because you didn't give enough time, like the legislature requires.
Mm-hmm.
But for RCLA purposes, let's say, put aside what the limitations deadlines are, because it could be contractual, it could be in a law. It requires the homeowner to give you notice of the defects in detail, and then it gives you, the builder, an opportunity to inspect if you ask for it, and a right to cure. So even if they say there's a leak, you can go check it out. If you think it's something that you might be responsible for, say, hey, okay, fine, we'll take care of it. It's almost like a warranty a little bit. We can go and take care of it. No questions asked. We'll all move on. So it gives you an opportunity to repair, or you can just offer to pay for the repair and they can hire whoever they want to. Say you had a bad you had a bad relationship with this customer, you don't want to deal with their crap anymore. Okay, just say, fine, what do you think it's worth? I'll pay you this amount. Let's go our separate ways on this. But if you ever face a claim like this, you want to make sure that whatever your offer is reasonable. Because if it's not reasonable, then you expose yourself to even more liability. So if you give a reasonable repair offer and they turn it down, well, then under that law, you cap their damages. You limit your exposure.
Yeah.
And whatever it is, if they get, a ruling or whatever for a certain number, well, if they compare that to what your first offer was and your offer was reasonable comparatively, then now you're only liable for the market value of what your offer was.
Well, that's great. So pretty much if someone's a mess and if you think like there's gray area, then you should offer to fix it and offer to pay for a reasonable repair as soon as you possibly can, because at that point, if they take it further, like you're capping the amount that you're liable for at that point.
Yeah.
That's great.
Exactly.
That's good. That's really good to know. Because I would imagine a lot of people want to puff their chests and like, I don't know, like,
exactly.
But it's like, no, like that you could, if this is $1,000 repair, just say, I will do this. If they're crazy, they're not going to accept it anyways, but you just capped your liability.
Yeah. And if you don't do it, if you decide to puff your chest up and be unreasonable, then your exposure goes up significantly. You are then now not only are you on the hook for the repair costs to fix an issue, now you expose yourself to attorney's fees. Now you expose yourself to consultant fees. So if they hire somebody to come in and take a look at it and give them a report and do all that, oftentimes that's several grand. Now you're also on the hook for that. If they have to move out during the repairs, you're now liable for their temporary housing expenses. If there's any like damaged goods in the house that occurred during the repairs or because of the issue, now you're also on the hook for those damaged goods. So,
so part of the point is like, if you think maybe they could be right, like unless you're willing to like die on the hill pretty much, then just move on. Say, hey, let's finish this rather than let's see how it shakes out. Like the only way you should fight that kind of thing is if you know without a doubt that you're in the right and they're in the wrong.
No, absolutely. And that's one of the biggest points about it, is just be reasonable. And then if you are able to get it resolved, then you want about as airtight of a settlement agreement as possible, because if they're coming at you with a claim and you just don't want to deal with them anymore, you want to make sure that you have a settlement agreement that says, all right, fine, we're wiping our hands of each other. This is it.
And would you make that for your client, or would their lawyer make the settlement agreement?
Typically how it works is if it's the person that's like making the offer to pay or do the repair or whatever it is, their attorney drafts it up. So
okay, that makes sense.
If my roofing client is the one that does that, makes the repair, offers to pay, I'm drafting it up, and me and the other attorney will go back and forth. If they even have another attorney, they may not hire one. So maybe just going back and forth with the homeowner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's like all these things, really. I mean, the project contracts, employment contracts, getting paid, what happens when people refuse to pay, what happens if someone sues you. A lot of this stuff, like, guys, don't live in a fairy world. Like, business is brutal. And especially in your world, in your line of work, like you're dealing with people's homes, like there's a ton of emotion involved. It's very important to consider this stuff, and don't be the person that assumed this stuff wouldn't be a problem for them. Don't be the person that said, I'll deal with that later. I have other things that are priorities now, because I promise you, you're going to wish it was a priority if it comes up, and hopefully it doesn't. Truly, like, hopefully things are smooth and all of that. But something that I hear a lot is like, when it gets easy, push harder. That's like in business and life and all that. Like when it gets easy, push harder. And that doesn't mean like, oh, you shouldn't accept an easy life. It means like if in business you're crushing it, all of a sudden you're getting like, that's when you need to push on the gas even more instead of letting loose. In those moments, that's the type of time where like, let's get legally fortified. Let's do this. Let's do that. Or even if right now you're new and you're just kind of getting things figured out, like, hey, let's get this stuff in place, because the last thing I want to do as a young business is to expose myself to a massive amount of liability before I have a lot of cash reserves or anything like that. Like this is the getting the employment contracts, the subcontractor agreements, the project contracts, doing those three things before you have these problems is something that could save you tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars if you got yourself in the wrong pickle. So how much, I mean, roughly, and you don't have to like giving, like if say I was a new contractor and I said, hey, I want to work with you, Steven. I want a project contract and employment contract, and a subcontractor agreement. So like a 1099 agreement and like what would that look like? I know that I'm sorry for putting you on the spot if you're more of a like closer, but
yeah, no, I mean, so typically, I mean, to kind of do like that full service kind of first thing of getting those contracts, because like the whole goal is you have a contract you can deal with. It doesn't have to be tailor fit to every single new homeowner. That's why there's blanks in there to fill out. Whatever the price is, whatever the scope of work is, those things you can put a form together so that fills out. But you just want to have the contracts that are there that the base contracts you use every single time for, like I said, employment agreements, subcontractor agreements, roofing, scope work build agreements. But to put some of that together, in the past of what I've done, it was only for the build agreements alone. I've done that for like $5,000 just for like total. But I mean, to do all three, it'd probably be somewhere around that, maybe a little bit more. I haven't just done a full, all three type agreements like that. But it would probably be somewhere around that. And then I would say per year you go back and you just look over it again. And that's something that if it's my client, they come to me and say, hey, can we look over our contracts again? It's my contract I drafted. I'll go back through and make sure. I'm not going to charge you for me reviewing my own contract again.
Yeah.
But
it's good to know, because things change. Just like you said, apparently non-competes potentially are going to be a thing of the past here shortly. So like that's a big deal. That is in many contracts. So like that's the kind of thing that it's important to know. It's important to know when that stuff is happening, because if you don't realize that, and I'm pulling up your email address right now because I want to, is it okay if I put it on the screen?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My email address, my office number, all of it's fine.
All right. So what I really encourage you guys to do, if you're in Texas, if you're not in Texas, find a local attorney. What should they search for specifically?
I mean, we just call our firm, we just bill ourselves as construction lawyers. I mean, you just want to look, someone that shows they have a knowledge of construction law in your state, and they are out there.
Yeah,
there's conferences we go to all the time that are nationally. I've seen meeting other councils around the country, and then there's offices that are here in Houston that that stay busy, but they have offices around. They're national. They're expensive, but they have offices around the country too.
Yeah, and so if you are watching this, and whether it's now or in 3 months, I want you to know and understand that this 5, 6, 7,000, whatever it ends up costing, it is one of the truest forms of an investment. this is more valuable than your insurance. This is more valuable than any of that, because this is going to avoid you even having to dip into your liability insurance in some cases if you do it right. So this kind of stuff, like this is the stuff that you need in order to make sure that your business is fortified, you have moats around it and all of that. Like we want to make sure that you're able to survive and weather the storms that are inevitably going to come as a business owner. And one of the best ways to do that is by making sure that legally everything's buttoned up and everything's good. A lot of us are kind of riding by the seat of our pants, figuring things out, shooting from the hip. This is not a place to shoot from the hip. So I highly encourage you just to make sure that you're very intentional and you're thinking and putting a lot of thought and taking this side of your business very seriously. It's not just a piece of paper. It's not. It is your security. It is your body armor. It is the concrete wall that you get to hide behind if the bullets start flying. Like this is the stuff that you need in order to make sure that you're able to stay afloat in hard times, because they're inevitable. I hate to say it, but it happens. You're working on homes, big stuff. Construction's messy business sometimes. So
Absolutely.
Steve, as we're wrapping up, is there anything that you want to add or you want to make sure people know, as some parting words?
No, I mean, we've covered a lot of it. I mean, there's so much other stuff we could have gone into, particularly on how additional contract language you have to do if you're doing disaster remediation. Because I know a lot of contractors, whether they be roofing or general contractors that do residential construction, when we were hitting February 2 years ago with that freeze, everyone turned from doing whatever jobs they were doing to doing remediation work. Well, there are certain things you have to either include in your contract if you're doing remediation work. And if you don't do that, then you again expose yourself to 3 times the damages if someone wants to go after you if you do it wrong. And so, again, there's I made sure we touched the high notes, but there's so much other stuff out there, and I don't mean it as a way to say, I'm so smart and I'm the only one that knows about it. But, again, I'm learning still every day on this job because there's just so much the construction law deals with. And, again, we just talked about how it deals with with roofing contractors dealing with homeowners. There's so many other things that, if you want to build your business and, you feel like you've established your foot in residential roofing, you don't want to move to commercial roofing, there are other variables to consider and other things we've talked about today you don't have to worry about. If you're dealing with, when you do that, if you're going to be a sub on a commercial project, you're going to be a general contractor on a commercial project, you're going to start working public projects. There's so many other things to go that we could go into. I'd be happy to talk to anybody about it. That's where they want to maybe direct their business towards in the future. But like you said, really, what we talked about today is just ways that try and beat that, help you beat that 3-year mark and keep going.
Yeah. And guys and gals here, like, it's like I said, like, save this contact information. I think you should probably reach out to him now, unless you know that you've already have some tight contracts and employment agreements and all of that. But this is the kind of thing that this is what business owners do. This is how to be a mature business owner. This is one of the big ways to do it. And Steven's an incredible person. I'd vouch for him any day. I highly, highly suggest reaching out to him. And just make sure to take these things seriously. That's how I want to leave you. Is this is one of the most important things. I'm all about, once again, helping you become self-sufficient, helping you grow, and helping you not get knocked off course very easily. And this is one of the best ways to do it. More effective than almost anything I can do for you would be making sure that you're protected in this category. Because if you're not, it makes everything I do almost worthless if something goes wrong. So please reach out to Steven. Leave a comment on just any questions you have, or reach out to me if you have specific questions, and I can either pass them to him or you can reach out to him directly. Appreciate y'all. Steven, thanks so much for being here. It's fun to be able to reconnect in this way, and we'll talk soon. I'm going to end the broadcast, so stay on here.
Thanks,
All right.
everybody, for your time.
See ya.